one more session of Addivaret Kids regarding various understandings and awareness about the skill development of our children. We have been discussing about social skill development as a series, and in this series we talked about the antisocial or aggressiveness of children and various components in this, and we discussed that how we understand those things and how we deal with them effectively. And today we are discussing the sixth component in this series of antisocial and aggressiveness, and that is all about when a child destroys various things, possessions that belong to others. These are very common attribute in a child in the preschool years. And when a child picks up any item which is of lot of curious to the child, or otherwise, the child sometimes tries to play with those toys, and in the process the child breaks it, or sometimes the child destroys it. So since this is a very common attribute and common behavior in most of the children, we need to understand a little bit more on that and see that how we can manage those things effectively. So first of all, we need to understand what causes that a child displays that behavior of destroying various things or possessions that belong to others. Number one, let's talk about very positive note. Sometimes the child wants to explore things in a toy or in a given position, so that the child wants to know more on that. So when the child is not aware about the usage of a particular toy or particular possession of somebody, then child tries to understand a little more on that. Because when a toy is there in front of a child will be having lot of understanding and lot of perception regarding that toy. Because we have already discussed about make-believe games, and in the process when child is getting exposed to something, then child will perceive that this particular toy or particular thing would behave in certain way. And if it doesn't work in that way what the child perceives, then child will try to look into it by breaking it. So in the process, child destroys that. But this is a more positive sense. It's not very negative sense. It's a very positive sense, which is very good for the cognitive development of the child. So this is one thing we must able to differentiate whether it is for the positive side or it is for the negative side. The only way we can understand, even in the process child destroys his or her own possession, then it is always a positive note. But if the child only destroys the possessions of others, then it is considered to be a negative way, and that behavior must be controlled. Then when the child tries to communicate, because language and spoken things are not well developed in certain ages. So during that age, if child wants to communicate certain things, then child will try to do that by simply breaking a particular toy or breaking a particular thing. So we must understand one thing, that if a child wants to speak something, then we try to get along the child and try to understand what the child is trying to make a point. So this could be the second reason why the child often destroys the toys. Third thing, which is common from the negative perspective, when a child doesn't have that particular toy or particular thing, but the child sees those things with others, then there is a sense of jealousy. And when the child feels child doesn't have power on those, child doesn't have the the control on those positions and those things, then child will try to just make a point that if I do not have those things, you should not have those things as well. So by keeping that thought process, the child tries to break those things, so that child tries to show that he or she is powerful while destroying things of others. So this is one thing we need to work on if the child is having this kind of behavioral trait. Next could be when the child is quite stressful, when the child is quite anxious, then child will display such kind of behavior by throwing things and breaking things. So we must understand if the child is being little bit of stressful because of child was not allowed to play, child is not allowed to ride a cycle, child is not allowed to things for which the child is requesting or trying to do. If those things happens, then child may display that behavior of anger, and in the process of anger child will destroy things. Then last one is the child wants to take revenge. This happens with many children, and let me share one incident. In one of the school in the upper kindergarten class, a child was punished by the teacher because of some mischief act in the class, and one of the child in the classroom started laughing and started poking to the child who was punished. So after this incident, just after 45 minutes to 1 hour time, the child was having her breakfast along with a plastic bottle of water, and the child who was punished, then he suddenly came and picked up that bottle and threw it to the ground, and in the process the bottle was broken. So this incident shows that the child did all this because to take the revenge, and revenge was taken because that another child was laughing when the punishment was given. So these are various reasons for which the child will display that behavior by throwing things and destroying things. So we should keep those things in mind, and when our child is displaying such kind of behavioral aspect related to breaking of things, then we must able to relate to some of the reason for which such kind of things are happening. Now once we understand the reason, or even we do not understand the reason, but if the child is involved in such kind of behavior, then it is very important to work on them and make sure the child is not developing that habitual way of behaving such kind of behavior again and again. So few things we must do to manage those things or deal with such situation effectively. Number one, what we need to do not allow children to bring gadgets to school. Only teaching material should be allowed. In the process, what happens if the child brings something to the school which is bit new and curious to other children, then other children will try to look at them, and in the process that toy or that gadget may be broken. Again, other children may feel that I don't have that particular thing with me, why this person will be having those. So having that inequality in terms of the possessions along with the children makes a lot of jealousy among themselves. So it's always good only those items will be allowed which everybody has with them, like the school books, the notebook, the pencil, crayon. Those things are common and everyone has. So that kind of feelings will not come among any children. Second, do not provide the additional or undue benefit to other children or siblings for that purpose at home. Sometimes, without our knowledge, without our consciousness, we try to provide some additional benefit, or we praise some of the children by ignoring others. So in the process there is a sense of taking revenge, and other children also feel little bit of ignored. So if such kind of thing happens, then few children may develop such kind of behavior, and they want to simply take revenge, and in the process they try to destroy things that belong to other children. Then ignoring children, that's what we have just discussed. If we ignore somebody, then that's a kind of feeling the child develop that they are not important, and their presence doesn't make any difference. So in such situation, child will develop some kind of feelings for which the destroying things will be the solution for the child. It may happen when a new child is born in a family and the elder one is ignored, then such kind of behavior becomes very common in many households, and the elder sibling will start destroying things that belong to the younger one. So it's purely because of ignoring the person's presence, and that leads to such kind of behavior. And if such behavior will not be controlled and will not be taken care of, then it will become a habitual behavior in nature. So ignorance is a big no-no. Whatever situation is that, we should be conscious enough to acknowledge the presence of the child, wherever is essential. Then finally, make sure that the child knows the usage before a toy and other teaching material that is given to them. So sometimes, as we say, that out of curiosity, the child wants to check a particular thing or particular toy, and if that doesn't match with the perception of the child, then the child will more likely destroy it. So whenever we provide any position or any toy to a child, we must explain the usage of these things. So once the usage is understood quite well, then less likely the child will destroy anything that whether belong to himself or herself, or it belong to others. So these are very simple but effective ways to manage and deal with such kind of behavior among children, and I'm sure that these are doable things we as parents and teachers can do effectively. Now, as usual, we must have some documentation so that we know that if such kind of behavior is happening and the child is displaying such behavior or not. Then there are three things we must keep it in mind, and as a part of our evaluation, then we have to keep it noted. Number one is that if the child is ignored in front of other children, if such kind of things are happening and child feels that and talks that child is ignored, then that has to be documented. Children bring projections and not related to the schools and learning procedure. If they never bring, they get a score of 0, and they often bring. If they bring those things often, it is more likely other children will develop those kind of feeling of jealousy, which will lead to the destruction of goods or toys. Then finally, the child is too much self-obsessed. When the child is too much of self-obsessed, then it may lead to jealousy of others, people's, other children's improvement, or teacher. If the teacher is praising other children, another child will feel bad if the child is too much self-obsessed. So if a child is self-obsessed, then we have to give a score of 3. And if the child is not very often showing that behavior of self obsession, then we'll give a score of 0. So scoring pattern is such as in the beginning we have already discussed. More the score, more is likely be having the uh, a situation where the child's behavior is very very negative. If the score is less, then less likely the child will be having this problematic behavior uh, in store. So because of that, we need to document everything and keep it in mind. And this documentation will help if at all we need to take some kind of action or have some strategy to work on them. So with this, we complete this session, and next session we'll be talking about a situation when the child tells lies. Telling lies is not very new; it's a very common phenomena. But if a child tells lies very often, then that becomes a kind of negative behavioral pattern, and that pattern is going to impact the social effectiveness of the child. So we need to understand that and work on them, and we'll just deal with that in our next session. So thank you so much for your patient listening, and I'm sure such kind of information will provide us a lot of awareness to handle effectively the overall growth of our children. Thank you so much.